In today's video, I'm going to be replacing this perished aerial grommet and also investigating a really poor radio reception on this BMW Z3. The aerial grommets on these cars are very prone to perishing. In fact, I can go a stage further with this car. It's missing altogether. It's completely disintegrated, and this would let water straight into the boot. A replacement grommet is very easy to obtain from a BMW dealer, and they're only about £10. As is often the case, if you buy one from eBay, it's more than that, and you can never be sure it's genuine. The aerial needs to be removed from the car in order to replace this grommet. To start with, we unscrew the mast. Sometimes these are seized. Heading into the left-hand side of the boot of the car, there is a clip to release. We turn it a quarter of a turn and it's removed. We can now remove the carpet on this side, which exposes the roof motor and up behind it the aerial. For simplicity and to make access to the aerial easier, I am going to loosen and move this pump. First we loosen this 13mm nut. I also loosen this 13mm nut, which releases a couple of earth cables. This now is very easy to release. There are two metal pegs that engage into rubber bungs. And I just rest that to one side for a minute. Now we get a really good view of the aerial itself. So we've got a few things going on here. This is the aerial base amplifier. There's an earth strap. You've got the coax cable connection here. This is the signal that comes from the radio. There should be 12 volts here, which energizes the amplifier, and then you've got another earth wire there. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to check to see if we've got 12 volts here when the ignition is on and the radio is switched on. And we've got a voltage, that's close enough. I'm disconnecting that feed and that will give me access to this 10mm nut, which we need to undo. Release this earth wire, also this coax. Up under here is another large grommet. This needs to be loosened. This needs to be pulled away and released from the bodywork, which will allow us to lower the aerial. At this point I like to just put some wax on this area and clean this up, because once the grommet's in, we'll never get another opportunity to do that again. The grommet can then be pressed into place, ensuring it's seated correctly. I apply a little bit of WD just to help it slide into position. And then we feed the aerial back up through the grommet. You will know it's in position when the top of the aerial is level with the grommet, and when this bracket can be pushed over the inbuilt stud. Reposition the aerial coax bracket and also this earth point, and refit the 10mm nut and reposition this large grommet underneath. That's all back in. The aerial base is level with the grommet. Coax bracket and earth point reattached with this 10mm nut that secures the aerial to the vehicle. And then just finally check this coax fitting here is tight, which it is. May have to remove that if we need to do a continuity check from front to rear on this coax cable if that turns out to be suspect, because as I said, we have no radio reception on this car at all. And then we'll refit this. We know we've got 12 volts there or near enough, and we can now relocate this roof motor. really is just a case of locating those two lugs into those two rubber bushings. Refit the two earth cables, tighten this 13mm nut, and finally tighten this nut here that secures the upper mounting. We can refit this carpet and trim. It tucks in under here. Refit the fixing and turn it a quarter of a turn, and that's in place. Time to refit the mast. I've just put a little bit of white grease on the end there. Screw the aerial mast back in. And there we have it. One lovely grommet. That will now be watertight. Not that I expect this car to ever get wet. That was a nice straightforward job. We now turn our attention to the inside of the car. I need to see what we've got going on at the back here on the coaxial connection, the aerial connection onto the back of the radio. Removing these radios is really easy. You just open up these little flap things here, and then using a 2.5mm Allen key. I think there is a special BMW tool for this, but this seems to work. Just loosen these little Allen keys, little screws in here, enough. You have to loosen them quite a lot actually, until the radio can be slid out. Don't forget that if you do disturb the power supply to the radio, in order for it to work again afterwards, you will need the radio code. Having checked the 12-volt feed from the head unit to the aerial in the boot, it's present when the radio is on. So I now turn my attention to this coaxial cable, and I have found this kind of mess. I'm just currently unravelling this tape to find out exactly what is going on under here. There's some sort of strange plastic here. I don't know, that doesn't look standard. Let's unravel this and see what we find. I think, oh, huh. Well, that could very well explain why there's no radio reception. Look at that. That wasn't connected. Right, all is not lost, because with the radio came a radio amplifier, which was a Sony thing. And I am going to use that to make this good. This here is a Sony amplifier, so I'm going to use this coax here and make an attempt at joining that to this, because to replace the whole front to rear coax cable is expensive and a pain. Now bear with me here, because there is some method in my madness. The first thing to do is to work out a heat shrink for this outer wire. Having found suitable heat shrink, let's stick this on this wire and get that way up there so it's out of the way. Next I'm going to strip back some of the outer sheath. Okay. We need to make sure we get every single strand of that outer cable, and we do the same with this. See, I don't really want to be soldering here. I think it won't be necessary. We do the same. We isolate the outer shielding. Make sure we get every strand. There's no way we want any strays. One stray strand making contact with the inner core will destroy my plan. For good measure, I'm going to put another piece of heat shrink on here. More will become apparent as this progresses. I now need to expose half of this. It's extremely fine wire inside, and it's very easy to cut it, which we want to avoid. It's not like your TV aerial wiring where that core is thick. And then we do the same on the car. Using a little piece of this, we now need to feed both these wires in. So very carefully feed this in. It's really hard to do because it wants to break. That should do. So they're both in there together, and we now want this heat shrink to go over that centre section. Right until it gets there. We now heat that. Using another piece of the outer screening that we're going to salvage from here. These cables are then joined together. And at this point we can then reintroduce this little bit of heat shrink. Get the heat shrink over that middle section there. And get that heat shrink doing its job. Now if that's held up, that should be a reasonable connection. Obviously it's not perfect, a bit of a rush job, but that should give us some signal until we can work out what to do with this cable, whether it's a new cable or something else. I'm going to use some fabric tape to wrap this, which will give it some extra strength, because the weak point is the center core. Gonna make a couple of passes with this, both so one way and then the other. Okay, there we go. The moment of truth. Let's see if we've got any radio reception now. And just like that, instantly we've got radio reception. That's a successful repair. Not sure how long it will last. No, it might need a coax cable at some point, but I think that's a pretty good result. Radio is pushed back in, and we just tighten up these Allen key bolts. Little tiny little fixings in there. We just tighten those up until the radio holds on each side. When these are fully tightened, we just close that little flap there and it's done.
Financial circumstances and borrowing.
Well, that is it for another video. We now have a functioning radio with full radio reception and also a nice watertight grommet around the aerial. Hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you again in another video very soon. Thank you very much and goodbye.